Ritter Communications presents the NEA Varsity Podcast, brought to you by Tubetown and NEA Sports. Here are your hosts, Marcus Carlton and Ryan Fletcher.
Hey, everybody. Marcus Carlton and Ryan Fletcher back again, episode 16 of NEA Varsity Podcast. Ryan, happy Monday morning to you.
Happy Monday morning to you, Marcus.
It's I guess we could call this the post Super Monday, and man, we're getting down to crunch time here with some of the high school basketball in the area, and district tournaments are within sight, and everybody's kind of scrambling to get that last push for seeding in the upcoming district tournaments.
Yeah, I mean it's big time of year where every game counts, and you got different teams and different conferences, needing to win out, and some watching the scoreboards around the area, hoping that some other folks lose so they can get that better seed. So, it's almost district, region, and regional tournament time.
Yeah, this is a fun time of the year, and everything compacts a little bit, and you start getting a lot of games in a short amount of time with the end of conference season, and then you get into the district tournaments. And you guys had a couple of really good games since we've had our last podcast.
Yeah, we have. The last time we talked was the Friday afternoon before the Friday night game that we had at Valley View in Brookland. First off, I want to say that's the first time that Suncom NEA Sports has covered a game at Brookland. I know you guys have done that before. It was only the second time I'd ever been in that gym. The only other time I'd been in the gym was in a semifinals game where Westside and I believe it was
Southside
played in the semifinal game to go to the state. So, obviously for that particular game, it was going to be packed, and I was impressed. But I tell you what, Valley View and Brookland packed that arena that they have. I'm just going to say that as far as all the new gyms in the entire area, I think they have the best one in terms of atmosphere. And it's not as big as some of maybe like a Valley View or whatever, but I do think it's better as far as having that extra advantage. I like as far as scoreboards and that goes, they do have the best gym. I mean, it is just so impressive. So kudos to Brookland and Bobby Gross for being able to get folks to agree to build that place. And it really is a palace here in Northeast Arkansas. They had a lot of special things going that night. There was a lady that was in battle with breast. They did a pen cap. Everybody was involved in that. I mean, it just really displayed a positive atmosphere as far as the Brookland community goes. I was just utterly impressed by them. So they did all that. They actually recognized all the elementary boys basketball teams. So you had, almost 100 elementary kids in their own section. They were all dressed up in certain shirts, and it was just super loud. And Brookland definitely had an advantage going into that game. And I had actually said that I felt like Brookland had a chance to win that basketball game, and I want to say that's even who I had picked. And sure enough, not only did they win, but they ended up winning by 8, but they were up by 50 at one point. They played pretty well. They have obviously slowed the game down at times, and at some points they ran and they run and gun for a little bit. So it was interesting to watch that. They had a good night out of Jackson Ballard, and then they had 2 or 3 guys. David York, he stepped off the bench and had a good night. He's a young sophomore for them. Just several guys that played well. And Valley View, I'll say this: Valley View couldn't have shot any worse than they did. They shot, I think, 25% for the game. CJ Delancey, who's one of the better big men in the area, I will honestly say, and I can guarantee you, CJ will never have a performance like he did ever again in that particular game. I bet you he shot it over 10 times He didn't make a single basket, and the majority of those shots came within 4 or 5 feet. It was just one of those nights that he flat out could not get a shot to fall. And I'm talking about even layups that he couldn't get to go in. And it's just, it was like the stars had aligned against him, and I've never quite seen anything like it. And I talked to Coach Davis and Coach Manchester after the game. They weren't displeased with the shot selection that he took or anything like that. And I was with him. I mean, for the most part, he took good shots, but just couldn't get anything to fall. And if he could just get 4 or 5 of them to drop, then, they probably win that basketball game. But, they had they've got Travis Graff and Andrew Hunt, 2 really good shooters. I don't think Andrew gets to shoot the ball quite as much. He's one of the best sharp three-point shooters in the entire area. I think they need to get him the ball a little bit more. But with that being said, it was overall Brookland came out. They were more prepared and ready to go, and they came out victorious. So, we had that game. And then, too, we also had Osceola Manila on this past Thursday night. It was very odd to have that as a Thursday night basketball game. Normally that's a Friday night game. The crowd was a little bit low because the girls were playing elsewhere, and I was informed that several of their elementary teams were off playing in their conference tournaments too. That game was supposed to have been played in mid-December, but Osceola was playing in a state final for football, and so they had to reschedule that game. So it was just odd. The atmosphere was a little bit lethargic, very opposite of what I saw in Brookland. At times it got loud, but it was a back-and-forth battle. Obviously, that's a big-time rivalry that has been going on between those 2 schools for quite some time now. And Osceola, Manila came out shooting not too hot there in the first quarter. Osceola had an opportunity to jump on them pretty big, and they failed to do so. They let Manila hang around. Daley Blue, who is a top player in the entire area. Love watching the kid play. He can really shoot it. He has a great mid-range game. He put up 20-plus, and going in towards the very end of the third quarter, Ty Wagner, who's a pretty solid junior for them, nailed a 3 at the right near the buzzer. And the momentum just completely switched. That gave them the lead, and they went on a pretty good tear early in the fourth quarter, put them up by about 9. I think they even might have got up by 10 or 11 at one point. Osceola just couldn't come back from that. But I'll tell you, when you look at that conference, there are 5 teams in that conference that on any given night could be the best team in the conference. And I'm talking about Manila, Osceola, Trumann, Gosnell, and Rivercrest. And Gosnell was my dark horse going into the year. They, I believe, are in first place in that conference. And I never would have guessed that. I would have thought, well, they'll scoot up to maybe third, maybe push for second. They're in the driver's seat, from my understanding. So one of those 4 or 5 teams is not going to make the regional tournament. And I would say that all 5 of those teams are some of the best teams in Class 3A. So, but anyway, Manila got a big win. They have swept Osceola on the season. So we've had 2 pretty good basketball games thus far, Marcus. And I know you guys covered a game, I believe it was last Monday night, that I watched and really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was Brandon Reed and I were talking about this. He's part of Tubetown here and plays a big role for it and helps you guys out sometimes, like with the media day and such. And we were talking about it, and with all of the games and stuff that we've done over the past several years, that's probably one of the most entertaining games that we've had, possibly in the history of the time that we've been doing games. It was just, you had everything you could ask for in that one. You had the top seed coming in. You had number 2 2 in the conference, right on their heels. You had a crazy atmosphere. I mean, it's I took some pictures and put them on the Tubetown Twitter and my Instagram of just how full the dome was there at Westside. And then the band came out for that game. I mean, it's like everybody knew this was a huge game, and Westside was pulling out all the stops to give them the best environment possible. And overall, I thought Westside played really, really well. And they just had a few ill-timed turnovers. Of course, there's never a good time for a turnover, but it just seemed like they had a couple of turnovers that hit right in clutch time that honestly could have played a difference in the game. But then you start looking at the stats, and Westside missed a bunch of free throws as well. You get in the last 2 minutes of the game, and you've got somebody like Blyville, and I felt like they had Blyville on the ropes in the last couple minutes of the game. And you come down one possession, you have I think Riley Felkins slipped on the floor, turned the ball over, and then there were a couple times that Westside had a chance to put a little distance between them and Blyville with converting free throws, and they, for whatever reason, they just couldn't get them to go. But every other aspect of the game, I thought Westside played about as good as they could. I kind of wondered where Blyville's focus would be coming into that game, knowing that they had a 2-game lead over everybody in the conference. Blyville came into the game 9-0 in conference, and Westside came in, I believe, 7-2. So they had a 2-game lead over. Even if Westside had won the game, Blyville was still going to keep their first place positioning because they had the 2-game lead. So I kind of wondered where their focus would be. And hey, kudos to Coach Pierce and the Chickasaws, because they came in and they had the same focus that they would have if Blyville and Westside both had been undefeated in conference. So he kept them on task, and you can't really say enough about the job that Coach Pierce has done over there with that program. Getting them to this point. I mean, they're 10-0 in conference now, and that I told someone after the game the other night, I said that was the last chance of anybody beating them in regular season conference play. I felt like that was the best opportunity for somebody to sneak up on, or not necessarily sneak up on them, but just to get them and possibly give them a loss. And I got to give a shout to the Blyville fans as well, because almost half of the dome was filled with Blyville fans, and they were loud. They were rowdy. I mean, they helped contribute to that crazy environment. And I mean, I've seen some really good environments at the Dome, but I think this one has got to be top 2, top 3 of the atmospheres that I have seen in the last several years at the Dome there. I mean, it was just, it was crazy from tip off until the final whistle. And it was just, it was so much fun to be a part of, because I got a chance to sit there next to our announcers, Andy and Wes, and just kind of take it in. It was just electric. And, but Blyville, they say that the difference in good teams and great teams is that the great teams will always find a way to win no matter the circumstance. And that's exactly what Blyville did. I mean, they found a way to sneak out of there, out of the hostile environment and overcome all the obstacles they had and get the win and stay undefeated in conference play. And, I'm looking at this Blyville team, and I think they've got a very legit shot at ending up in Hot Springs here in, about 6 weeks for the 4A state title. It'll be interesting to see how they get matched up in regionals, but it would not surprise me in the least to see Blyville as one of the teams from Northeast Arkansas that makes the trip down to Hot Springs.
Well, I'll tell you this, and I agree with you 100% on that. And normally I am very skeptical about giving my old buddy Dr. Garrett Weaver any credit at all, just how we roll. But he predicted that they would make. We always pick on our sports show if we had to pick one team to make it to Hot Springs, who would it be? And he picked them. I mean, that was his team, and there's 4 of us that do that. We've done it for 3 years now. Not a single one of us has gotten it right yet. So I'm hoping somebody out of the 4 of us will get it right. And he picked them, and I think they got a great shot. Just like you say, it kind of depends on, what side of the regional or what side of the state bracket they get on. But and I'll say this, and in talking to Coach Davis here at Valley View, he said, and I believe it's Magnolia is the favorite.
Yes.
And he said, assuming they win their regional, you either want to also win your regional or you want to finish fourth in your regional if you're wanting to get opposite of them. So, and then he said you would rather finish third before you'd want to finish second. So if you're going to get in the regional championship, you better win it, basically is what he said.
Yeah.
If you want to be opposite of them. But yeah, I like what they've done. I like what Coach Pierce has done. You talk about the crowd, and that is definitely something I noticed. There was, it's always also fun if I'm broadcasting a game or listening to someone else's broadcast. There's always 2 or 3 mamas and daddies that are hollering. And, Blyville had some, but I don't know if Blyville is always – I haven't noticed them do that in the past in games that we've covered of theirs, but they've traveled well. Mm-hmm. But, man, traveled well to Westside.
They did. It was a full house, and there was the Dome has limited seating anyway. And then you bring a huge road crowd, and then you bring the band in on top of that, and the student section at Westside is always full. So there were people everywhere on the end of the gym where, when you walk in through the lobby, that end of the gym right there, there were people standing 2 and 3 deep underneath the goal. And then we had a few people standing down at the other end. I guess that would be when you come in the south end of the Warrior Dome, and then you had people standing along the north end as well. It was great. And then, God bless those Blyville fans, man. They love their kids, and they were not afraid to show it. So it was almost comical at times with some of the comments that, not everything came across the announcers' mics, so there were a few times that I was able to hear a few things that it wasn't anything bad. It was just very witty and very comical, and they had me doubled over a few times with just some of the comments they were making, and it's just a great atmosphere, man. Nobody, and that's the thing. When it was over, Blyville celebrated, but nobody got out of hand. The Westside fans, it was a tough loss, but they were gracious in the loss, and it was just a fun night, man. You and I both have seen so many games in the past where you have a hard-fought game like that, and sometimes things get ugly after the game. In every classification, we've seen it from single A all the way up to 6A. But this night, man, it was about everybody, having fun and everybody, and Blyville got to brag a little bit after the game, and they earned that. So it was just a great atmosphere, man. I enjoyed it so much. It was just a lot of fun.
Well, and y'all did a really good job in the broadcast too. I like the fact, you guys are mainly based out of Jonesboro and
right.
Covered on the west side, but did an excellent job of showing that crowd for Blyville and highlighting their players too, and that's always good. And I'll tell you something else. I really enjoy listening to Andy. He does a phenomenal job. I try to listen to him, and I'm going to compliment him because, like, in watching folks on Fox or CBS or whatever, some of the greats, I try to get tips from those guys
Sure.
and just listen. I take a lot from Andy in the way he does things, and y'all got a really good play-by-play guy. So kudos to Tubetown and what you guys do.
Yeah, we're very blessed to have Andy, and honestly, we've just been lucky to hold on to him as long as we have, and
And he
Yeah, he travels. Yeah, he lives in Memphis now. So he had taken his full-time job is in Memphis, and he had been living in Jonesboro and commuting to Memphis for a while. And just recently, I say recently, in the past few months, he's made the move, and he lives over in Memphis now. So he's traveling back over here after working all day, doing the game, and then driving all the way back to Memphis at night. So it's I mean, there's dedication there that is, got to tip your hat to that.
Yeah, for sure.
So Ryan, you guys have what do you guys have coming up this week?
We actually have we've only got 3 games left on the schedule, which always makes me sad because as much as I enjoy covering our football schedule, basketball is my favorite thing. With that being said, we have 2 games this week. We have a Tuesday night game, which is tomorrow night. That is Westside going to Brookland. It'll be the one time this year we've got to cover the Warriors, and excited to watch Riley Felkins play and some of his teammates. And, of course, we covered Brookland the other night, so we're going to be back in their gym. Really excited about that. But more importantly, anything, that is the crosstown rivalry in terms of basketball in this area. And, I know Westside and Valley View have that long-term rivalry that's been in existence. But when you talk about a rivalry that has really been heated over the last few seasons, it's those two. And, people want to say Jonesboro Nettleton. I mean, I'm sorry. It is what it is. But for me, that's not a big rivalry for me. They're in the same conference now, but they haven't been before. So, to me, the big crosstown rivalry has become this one with Westside Brookland. So, really looking forward to that. And I'll say this, Brookland's trying to make a push to finish higher within that conference. They're standing at 7-4. It wasn't too long ago they were either 4-4 or 5-4. So they're really rolling here lately. And they've got a chance if they can pull off a win against Westside, then I believe they will be tied with them, and it would be 8-4. Valley View's 8-3 right now, but there's still potential for them to lose. So you could have a 3-way tie for second place coming up. So it's like you said, like we've said already, it's coming down to the wire. Every game matters moving forward.
Yeah, after Blytheville in that conference, you've really got a log jam because you've got Valley View at 8-3, Westside at 8-3, Brookland at 7-4. Those 3 teams, and then Pocahontas drops down. You drop them down to 4-7. So it's mainly your top 4 teams, but really it's Blytheville and then Valley View, Westside, Brookland are all right there together. Valley View gets the nod right now, even though that them and Westside are both 8-3 because Valley View had the tiebreaker on the head-to-head, which there's a rematch coming a week from tomorrow night at the Warrior Dome, and we will be back there for that one as well. It'll be senior night at Westside, so expect another insane atmosphere with senior night and all the festivities that go on there. Brookland has a big opportunity in this game. We had the game when Brookland went over to the Dome back in December. I believe it was December 16th. And that was another tight, hard-fought game, just exactly what you would expect out of a rivalry game. And I expect the same thing tomorrow night. And, Brookland will be looking because Brookland was not happy leaving the Dome with the loss back in December. So I expect them to have an atmosphere much like they did for the Valley View game, and things to be insane there in Bearcat Arena. And I think you guys are set up for a really good one there. I think that'll be great. And we have to mention the run that Riley Felkins has been on of late, of the last 6, 7, 8 games, whatever it's been. He's had totals. I know he had a 46-point game over at Batesville a couple weeks ago, and then he had, I want to say he had about 35 or so against Blytheville in the broadcast we had. But, I mean, he's had like 29, 34, 46, 40, and 35. And, I mean, he's just been on an insane tear lately. And I don't know how you guard him, because if you take away his 3-point capability, he's going to drive by you, and he's either going to shoot a layup or he's going to kick out or dish. And then if you back off of him, if you give him an inch, he'll pull up from 24, 25, 26 feet out and nail the 3. So, but I mean, if there's anybody who can come up with a defensive scheme, it's going to be Coach Gross, because as we all know, Coach Gross's teams are defense first. And, you were talking about Brookland making a push here at the end of the season. That's Bobby Gross basketball. That's what they do every year. they are kind of up and down a little bit until you get to late January, early February, and you look up and they're right there in the thick of things every single year. And I think a lot of that is due to the way that, Coach Gross schedules throughout the year. He always plays up. He always plays tough competition. And then, come tournament time, those guys are ready to go.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And I was kind of looking at it here at each team's schedule. Brookland, I think, probably has the toughest schedule moving forward, because I say that they're going to have, in order for them, I believe, to finish second, they're going to need to find a win over Blytheville and get the win over Westside. Whereas Westside will end up playing Brookland and Valley View. So, it's just going to be interesting to see how the way things turn out in this one. But to ask Brookland to pick up that win over Blytheville, that's going to be tough. But you know what? They could do it. They could win out, and they could still inevitably control their own destiny to potentially finish second.
No doubt. And it's going to be these last couple games for each team are going to be a dog fight. I mean, it's just going to be, I don't expect any blowouts in any of these games that are remaining, because I think when you look at it, if you look at let's take Blytheville out of the equation here, because I think they're the cream of the crop in the conference. But if you take Brookland, Westside, and Valley View, each team has their own unique identity and unique strength. But I think overall those teams are all very even.
Oh, very much so. I agree with that wholeheartedly. That's what's so much fun is watching these three battle it out to the very end. And, who knows, once you get to district and regional tournament time, all it takes is one game to knock somebody off. So you just never know what can happen. And I will continue to say this. Batesville has the potential to be a team that could upset one of those teams to get to the regional.
I agree.
I'm not going to put money on that, but they could. They've got some good players, and they definitely could eliminate somebody. So you got to be careful and look out for them. And real quick, I mentioned we have two games this week. Thursday night, we're covering our second girls contest of the year. We're going to be at Trumann for the first time. Hoxie and Trumann, those two teams have been going at it for the last couple of years as far as being on top of that conference. Coach Blue really wanted us to come down there and showcase his girls at least once this year, and I felt like that would be important for Suncom Media and NEA Sports to do as much as we can to highlight some of our really good girl athletes in the area too. So looking forward to that. I think that's another game that'll be fun to watch. Hoxie's a different team than they were a year ago. They don't have Sydney Gillum and some of those other ladies that have graduated. Trumann doesn't have Mallory Hartley, who in my opinion was the best female player in that conference this year, and one of the best in the entire state. But they're still two very good teams that are going to go at it. And Hoxie beat them pretty bad earlier in the year. I don't think that'll happen this time around. Forward to that. But if there's a game that we've got on our schedule this year that I think is going to be an all-out war and will come down to the final seconds, it's the one we got tomorrow night, the Westside and Brookland.
No doubt about it, man. That's there's a lot to look forward to in that one, and I'll definitely be keeping an eye on that. But sticking with the rivalry theme, we're going to be, for the first time in a couple of years, we're going to be over at the MAC tomorrow night and when I say who Buffalo Island's playing, I don't really have to preview it much more than that. Buffalo Island, Riverside. As well as everybody else in this area, if you follow high school basketball in Northeast Arkansas, when you say BIC Riverside, basically the rest of the story, because that has been a rivalry for Ryan as long as I can remember anyway.
Well, no doubt.
And you've had a unique perspective on that rivalry as well. And while these may not be two of the better teams from either school, it's still a rivalry game, and there's still Buffalo Island's sitting at 6-6 in conference play, Riverside's sitting at 5-7. So again, you're looking at positioning there. You're looking at the battle for fourth place there, honestly. So Buffalo Island 16-11 overall, Riverside 11-14 overall. But Buster's teams are another one of those that come late February when it gets about tournament time, you don't want to play them, because it doesn't matter if they've won 8 games or if they've won 28 games. That's not a team you want to see at the end of the year come tournament time, because one way or another, that Buster will find a way with his team to sneak up on somebody and steal one that maybe they shouldn't steal. Mike Kennard's in his first year here as the boys coach. If that name sounds familiar, he was previously the girls coach there at Buffalo Island, and I think all things considered, he's done a pretty good job. He's got them 16-11. 6-6 in conference play, and not knowing the rosters as well as I do some of the others. I mean, I think for a first year coach, I think you would take that and run with it.
Well, absolutely. I'll tell you what, and BI, it's been quite a story for them this year, because they had 3 seniors that left the team mid-December. Obviously, and they were starters. Might have been their best, if not second best player in Tate Schooley. So we actually covered the Riverside BIC game on December 20th, and that wasn't long after those guys had left. So you talk about having to kind of re-identify yourself and just not necessarily start from scratch, but, that's a big deal. And so, I think BIC to be playing better basketball now that they've been able to kind of reestablish themselves. Riverside, on the other hand, since the NEA tournament, they were on a pretty massive losing streak. I believe they'd lost 6 or 7 games in a row up until January 29th, which was last week, and Riverside reeled off 2 consecutive wins against Salem and Sloan. Now, those are the 2 worst teams in the conference, but you talk about needing to get some wins, and they really needed that. Riverside manhandled BIC on the 20th of December. I don't think that's going to happen this time, but I do think it'll be a very close game, and it is a game both schools really need to win.
No doubt about that. It's they're both have, like you said, they both come in winners of 2 of their last 2 on both sides, and when you're having a struggling season, but you can still beat your rival. That kind of takes a little bit of the sting away from maybe the season not going as you want, as long as you get that rivalry win. It's and this is another one of these games. I expect a pretty good atmosphere for this one as well. There's always, every game we've done in the MAC has always had a good atmosphere. And then, the running joke that we have with Buster is that, and he may really get me for mentioning this on the podcast, but Riverside is riding about an 8-game losing streak on Tubetown, and it got to the point to where when I would call Buster and tell him that we were going to come over, he's like, "No, y'all aren't coming. We can't win when you guys are here." And then I think the last time that we had a Buffalo Island Riverside game at the MAC, I'm pretty sure that was the last time that Buster was asked to leave the game early. So it was, for whatever reason, man, we're kind of bad luck on Riverside, and so I'm sure that their fans are all hoping they can break that streak tomorrow night. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there as well.
I know what you mean on that, because Lee Wimberly, up until late last year, he would have said the same thing about Suncom NEA Sports. They, for whatever reason, now I will say we were picking some really good teams to broadcast against them, but he was just like, wow. Between him and a couple parents that were coming to me, they were like, "Please, stay out of our gym."
Yeah.
Luckily, we've been able to. They've been picked up a couple wins, so we're on their good side again. So, maybe for y'all's sake, maybe you need a Riverside win. Tomorrow.
Yeah, maybe so. That maybe that'll kind of help Buster not give us that look like we were just I've seen the look before, and it's usually a look that he gives one of his players when they've committed a couple turnovers in a row. And I've joked before that I don't like being on the bad side of that look. So hopefully, maybe Riverside will come in and maybe they'll break the streak, or and we may just continue to be the darlings for Buffalo Island, because I think the last few games we've had of them, they've actually won. So something's got to give tomorrow night. So it'll be interesting to see for sure. And like I said, I'll definitely be keeping an eye on that Westside Brookland game that you guys have tomorrow night as well. It should be a great night of basketball all the way around.
Absolutely.
Well, that'll just about do it for episode 16 here of the NEA Varsity Podcast. Ryan, man, we'll do this again, and maybe we can get some previews in of some upcoming district tournaments, and we might even go so far as to make some predictions on what we think's going to happen.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. For Ryan Fletcher, I'm Marcus Carlton, and you've been listening to the NEA Varsity Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the NEA Varsity Podcast, a production of Ritter Communications, brought to you by Tubetown and NEA Sports. Be sure you're subscribed to the NEA Varsity Podcast to get the latest episodes. Tubetown is a community partnership of Ritter Communications.